Yep, that's right. I found the first Legacy Evolution figure before I managed to pick up a Dragon Megatron. And I am not buying that thing on the BBTS, where it's going to cost $10 more than retail. Because why, distribution, why? It's Transformers McDonald's crossover. You tell me I'm wrong! First up, let me assuage your fears. It's good. The QC isn't ruining everything like it has been recently. We are hopefully back on the good figure train. And this is a lot better than I initially feared based on the early pictures. Now I have to say that Hotshot here feels really small, and that's not because it is. It's actually a pretty good size for a deluxe. He's honestly bigger than most of them these days. He's like if you made half of Siege Sideswipes with sentient, put it in a dumb Spaceball helmet, and then spilled ketchup and mustard all over it. This is a Happy Meal toy if I ever saw one. And it's not just because once upon a time it totally was when I was young and innocent and happy, but still an angry, jaded cynic because that part's never changed. But what makes this figure feel so small is just how beefy all the production photography made this guy seem. And you know, it's kind of weird, right? Like the original design of not only this guy's old toy, but his appearance in the show was kind of a chunkmeister. Like this is inaccurately lithe, which makes sense for the character. He was always more spry in the show than his build would typically have allowed. And to be fair, maybe they were trying to replicate all of his chunk with the giant shins of death. These are some big ugly bastards. If this figure has a problem, it's not the backpack, which on its own is pretty painful on the eyes, but that part's tolerable. These things are made from so much of the car, it's a bit brutal. The good news is that the back panels do hinge around to the sides, so his legs can bend more than the 20 degrees we all woke up in a cold sweat every night fearing. The bad news is that for some reason they are designed to cover up the backs of his legs, which already look fine by most Transformer standards, while leaving the insides of his calves unmolested and is some of the ugliest things I've ever experienced. This is like top 3 most hideous side legs I've ever seen easily. It is both a mess and it's empty at the same time. And I don't know how it's not warping reality more for these two direct inverses of each other to exist at the same time in the same place. Now the good news is, the quality is pretty here. Most of the joints are either decently tight, or they're tight enough that a figure this light, and yes, this is remarkably low weight, isn't having trouble holding a pose. But the shoulders aren't good. These are noticeably weaker than literally any other joint on this thing. They don't fall down on their own, but they don't feel right. There also isn't a ton of paint on this thing, which suits me just fine. As I always say, most of your color breakup can be done with just the plastics, and the simple fact of the matter is that if I mask out all the paint on the figure, this is what you're left with. Yes, it really is that little. The roof of the car and his legs gets a decent amount, but plenty of figures are pulling this these days, and honestly, this should have just been opaque plastic. Normally, I'm not afraid of the clear stuff, but the transparent tabs on the windows lock together with a tenacity usually reserved for fights at Thanksgiving over politics. So I do expect these to break any transformation now. But real quick, I don't really think this needs more color breakup. It looks pretty good the way it is, and the gaudy colors do give it a lot of life. I find it a bit weird that he has a blatant spot where an auto badge is meant to go on the center of his chest, yet it's blank. Though I guess it's not really necessary considering the huge one on his shoulder. What's actually weirder is the Minicon port behind his head that's completely inaccessible. This probably should have done something to flip up or flip around to the back, but this is a great moment to talk about gimmicks. Because holy shit, we finally have figures with gimmicks again! I have been loving the budget masterpiece attempts Hasbro's been making these last few years. Like, it's super cool to see figures get released as the kinds of toys that I wanted as a child. Because I was a little heathen who didn't want gimmicks, I just wanted more serious representations of the character. But now as an adult, I miss the stupid things. So, the axle on his back turns into a giant cannon like in the show. Always weird that part of his anatomy was locked behind a Minicon transaction. I guess Hasbro was just ahead of the curve on that one. Love how the cannon is set up to melt Hotshot's face clean off. Maybe that's why his cool dude headphones turn into a dorky little blast visor, but it seems to be missing about half of his face, so he should fire it like one time and start looking like this. Though I don't know why the peg port isn't on both sides of the wheels. It pisses off my OCD because now he has 11 siege ports instead of 12, and they're all so weird. This one is a strange, lonely child. The ones in his legs are hard to use. He's got the ones in his epaulets, which I have never seen before. I don't even know if you can use the ones in his wrist because there's so much kibble in the way. He's got 2 in the sides of the cannon because, as we all know, the launcher is just for show when dealing with rockets. And then the ones in his feet are probably the most logical, but when was the last time you shot a gun with your toes? But yeah, this is cool and fun and I miss this. Yes, I'm an adult man and I'm playing with toys again. Bite me. As for the head, God, he has always had one of the dumbest domes in all the franchise. Just a necklace weirdo in the service of Dark Helmet and President Scroob. He looks like that human designed by scientists to be the ultimate car crash survivor. A desperate lack of neck on this boy. Now to be fair, this is exactly as it should be. This is what the character looks like. Does this look exactly correct? Yes. Does he look like a dweeb? Also yes. Personally, I'd have killed to have the tier lines painted red, to give him that Caminus vibe. But the way it is works out okay. And that would have made him less accurate to the show, so maybe they'll do a Gen Selects version. So the robot mode is pretty good. He's a little goofy looking, but that's mostly just the character. He's a bit kibble light in some areas and kibble heavy in others, and there are a small handful of features that could stand to have a little more paint. But all of that is pretty minor as long as you are ignoring the awful inner shins. The simple fact of the matter is that no Hotshot has ever looked this accurate or this good before, and the quality is very solid. Not a lot to worry about here. For the accessory, he's got this stupid fucking double gun thing. I hate it, and the way he aims it gives me cancer. It's well painted, I guess, and it's blast effect compatible, but boy is it ugly. And don't ever consider pegging this all the way in the vehicle mode. You will never get it back out. I had to pry it with a pair of pliers to get the pegs pulled free. It's just not worth it. And I don't understand why this can't separate into two parts. Honestly, I think this accessory only makes the figure lesser, really. Spend the budget this got on adding more to the figure itself. Now, posability is complicated. Head only swivels, but you can cheat it super hard for some up. Shoulders pull like a 100, but their backwards range is really limited. Normal 90 elbows, no wrists. Hips are unimpeded in all directions. Legs that you have to cheat really hard, but get pretty close to maximum. And feet with toe down and a pretty huge pivot. So anything that's bad about the posability can be worked around. And when it is, some of it is pretty decent. There's just a little too much of the working around it. But the worst things I have to say is that the neck is a real stretch to fake, and 90 elbows honestly shouldn't be a thing anymore. But it sure isn't the brick that we feared from the product photography. Now, the transformation ain't great. It's reasonably interesting, but the clear plastic is a concern. The ball joints like to pop off, and the whole thing just squishes together with an unsatisfying squelch. It doesn't have the Play-Doh factor, but I don't know how to describe it. It just feels bad. I want there to be clicks and snaps, and instead it's just like... Just why? Then you end up with this classic, ugly as sin crushed by an anvil car mode. This is exactly what it should be. It is also a giant, what the fuck am I looking at? This doesn't look like a real car. It looks like either a go-kart or a toy of a toy, like the old Penny Racer characters that Bumblebee and Cliffjumper were. So I have to wonder if this is just a labored reference. And overall, it's become too yellow, and the yellow has become shitty. The paint they used for the roof of the car mode is trash tier color matched to the rest of the vehicle. And yet another reason why they should have just used opaque plastic for this, as yellow hates being a coating color. Honestly, this part looks kind of green when the blue seeps through the sunny shade. This also has a few gimmicks, like it can do the weird car with pincers on the front thing, and now the Minicon port is free for public use, but I don't know if a Minicon will fit that. I don't seem to have any left to test it. I honestly think this looks worse with the engine on, but there's no denying it's a bit plain without. This also rolls like ass. The rear tires are fine, which is hilarious because they're the gimmick ones, but the front tires are rougher than shit and kind of grind while the tires travel. So it rips any momentum the car has right out and throws it in the trash. But don't let me undersell this. I've done nothing but talk mad shit on this alt mode when it looks basically perfect. It's got some panel line problems here and there, but when all's said and done, this has nailed what it wanted to be. This is pretty much exactly as faithful as the Starscream without all the QC holding it back. So who really cares if it doesn't roll great? Though the roof is pretty ugly, that really shouldn't have been done the way it was. And the door's kind of open, like you can pretend if you're, blind. Overall, if you're not a fan of the character, it's a below mediocre alt mode. It's a fictional, flat, ugly car that looks like a sedan that had a midlife crisis and decided that it wanted to be a street racer. But if you're down for the character, then it's a solid rendition of his vehicle mode, probably as good as we've ever gotten. And you can say the same for his robot mode. It's not bomb-proof like the original figure was, but it's more accurate than that thing was, and it looks better than that, and that other figure of him, which people seem to hate, though I don't know why. It looks mostly fine, can't say that I've ever handled it though. But it poses pretty good, and it has the gimmicks that you want to see, plus the sculpt is on point. So it's actually a really fun little guy. Even though the transformation is drowning in the swamp of squeesh. I don't know that I would call this a micro masterpiece, even though I feel like I have to. But either way, I can recommend this if you want a representation of this character. If you're on the fence about it, you won't hate it, but I doubt you'll feel blown away by this. It's a solid toy, and that's honestly what's so nice about this. It feels like a toy again, and not like it wants to be the perfect be-all, end-all chug figure of him. And that's kind of commendable nowadays. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.